Venusian Invader by Larry Sternig, originally published in Planet Stories, Winter, 1945. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Mart Wells shut off the alarm buzzer and jumped out of bed, much to his regret. He cussed and then grinned sheepishly as he brought up with a thud against the fortunately unbreakable glass of the window. A year on Callisto, and he could still forget that he weighed only 36 pounds and couldn't take a normal step without neutronium-weighted shoes. Regaining his balance, he yawned and looked out over the rough Callisto landscape beyond Compratown. Then he yawned again and reached for his uniform. A year before, Compratown and his job as rocket port dispatcher had been romance with a capital R. Now, he thought gloomily, romance with Leah with a capital L, and a fat lot of good that did him when Leah Barrow's father was old Fishface himself, director of Compratown. True, Compratown held fewer than 1,000 colonists, but it was the only inhabited spot on bleak Callisto, and its director was practical Tsar over a world. Yes, the director could well afford to look down his long nose at any uniform with fewer than 6 stars on its right sleeve, but Leah didn't feel that. Suddenly straightening up as he fastened his weighted boot, he looked more intently out of the window. Something that flashed caught his eye out in the barren, warped hills. A gleam of metal where metal shouldn't have been, and it looked like a small spaceship. Mart hastily pulled on his other boot and ran down the stairs. A red-headed mechanic from the rocket port was coming out of the building across the way. Mart called out, "Red! Something about a mile back in the hills looks like a spaceship. Has one been reported down?" "Huh?" The mechanic looked startled. "You sure?" "No, there hasn't been a report. Wait, I'll radio Central Communications." He darted back into the building and emerged a moment later. "No report. They're going to send out the autogyro to look at it. Say, Mart, there are only 2 small spaceships on Callisto. Could it be—" Mart was already running toward the corner from which he could see the landing field. He stopped so suddenly that the mechanic almost ran into him and said, "Phew! They're both there." Leah Barrow's trim little space cruiser was safe in port. So was the police one-seater Scout, but that wasn't the one Mart had looked for first. From near the administration building, a 2-place autogyro was rising, silhouetted for a moment between the horns of the reddish crescent of big Jupiter just above the horizon. As he walked across the field toward headquarters, Mart surveyed the familiar scene. 3 squat freighters were up on the racks, their ugly black bottoms over the ash-filled blasting pits. 4 others were on dollies ready to be serviced. All 7 were ready for their regular weekly Callisto Jupe hop, ready to pick up more ore. And, as usual, they'd go out today to clear the field for the sleeker, faster, long-haul ships that would arrive from Earth tomorrow for the smelted metal. Mart glanced at his wrist chronometer. 8 o'clock now. In an hour and a half, Freighter 1, right on schedule, would start testing its rocket tubes for the 10 o'clock hop, and an hour later, Freighter 2 would start to warm up for the 11 o'clock blasting off, and then the others, every hour on the hour. At his desk in the administration building, Mart picked up the familiar sheaf of clearance papers waiting for his attention and glanced through them. Initialing them was mere routine. They'd never cleared a minute early or a minute late since he'd been there. Director Barrow saw to that. The door opened. Mart put down the papers and glanced up. One of the workmen from the smelting plant, A tall, black-haired fellow wearing tinted glasses stood looking into the office. Mart didn't remember ever seeing him before, but with several hundred workmen, you couldn't remember all of them. "Director Barrow in?" Mart glanced up at the wall clock before he answered. "He'll be here in 21 minutes. Sit down and wait if you're off duty." He turned back to the papers and finished initialing them, grinning inwardly at being able to say that the director would arrive in 21 minutes exactly. It wasn't everywhere that one could make so accurate a prediction about anyone's arrival time, but Barrow was something of a chronometer himself. He tossed the papers toward the back of the desk and threw the switch of the communicator on his desk, leaned forward slightly. "Dispatcher Wells calling police autogyro." "Autogyro, Captain Wayne," came the reply. "Go ahead, Mart." "I was the one who reported seeing this spaceship, Cap. If it was one. Found it? If not, I can—" "Thanks, Mart, but we sighted it all right. We're now circling, looking for a spot to come down. It doesn't take much, but damned if we can perch on a ridge like a canary. Neither could that space speedster down there." "Wrecked? What's it look like?" Offhand, one of the single-place jobs that Venusians bought from Earth before the war. Full armament, too." "What? You sure, Cap? After the Earth-Venus 2280 treaty, we reclaimed and destroyed all the armed—" "Yeah, I know," cut in the captain's voice. "All but a few that the Venusian renegades, the pirates, got off with before then. Well, we're going down. Corey's found a place not too far from it where he can set the gyro down, or says he can." "If that's a pirate ship, Cap, be careful." "Don't worry, we're armed, and the ship's pretty smashed up. Probably at least KO'd whoever was in it. Well, keep your key open and I'll call you back. We're down." Mart found the shipment chart and began to check off tonnage. That much he wanted to get out of the way before. But something was gnawing at the back of his mind. It took him a moment to trace what it was. Of course, the workman who was waiting for the director was wearing tinted glasses. Tinted glasses on Callisto. It didn't make sense. The sun, 500 million miles away, gives only 25th of the light that falls on Earth. Even when that light is augmented by Big Jupe, it isn't. Yes, it was the first time he'd seen tinted glasses in Compratown. Curiously, he turned to glance at the seated workman, but the carrier wave of the desk communicator hummed, and he forgot his visitor as Captain Wayne's voice boomed in. "Dispatcher Wells, Captain Wayne calling dispatcher—" "Okay, Cap, go ahead." "We've examined the spaceship. No one's in it, hurt or otherwise. It's a single-seater. A pirate ship, all right." "You sure? How can you be certain?" "Aside from the fact that it would have no business around here if it wasn't, the papers are a giveaway. There's a whole sheaf of them. Reports on the Ganymede jewel shipments mostly, and a full set of data on our own little world, Mart. If there's a Venusian around, he sure knows his way." "Dope on Callisto? What kind?" "A detailed map of Compratown, showing every building. A full schedule of freighter hops both ways to Jupe and Earth. Details of shipments, that sort of thing." "Holy stars! But why should a pirate be interested in ore?" "Don't imagine he is, or in Compratown either. I'd say from the papers it was precautionary information. We don't keep our operations a secret here. He could have picked it up from any magazine article describing Compratown in detail." "But I still don't see." "The Ganymede jewel shipments, Mart. I'd say he was bound for Gany, and his ship went bluey while he was scudding past Callisto. He got pulled down here and just barely made a landing he could walk away from. I'm afraid there'll be trouble." Mart whistled. Well, the director's due now. He'll want a search organized and... Wait, here he is. Tell it over again, Cap, and you'll be reporting direct. Listen to this, Director. The tall, slender figure of Director Barrow stood impassively beside Mart's desk and listened to a repetition of Wayne's report. Not a flicker of expression passed over his gaunt face. As Wayne finished, the director asked, "Is he armed? Anything taken from the ship's equipment, Captain?" "Looks intact, but he probably has sidearms. All the pirates carry them. One funny thing, Director. The timer robot has been removed from the control panel. What on Callisto would he want with a loose timer?" "Report back to headquarters immediately, Captain Wayne," Director Barrow ordered. The hum of the carrier wave died, and Mart clicked off the set. Then, belatedly, he stood up and saluted. "Anything I can do, sir?" "Everything's set for the freighters to clear as usual, so I'm more or less free." Barrow nodded. "Very good, Wells. You may go to the field and direct a search of the freighters. The Venusian's first thought will be to get away, and he may already be stowed in one of—" A dry voice interrupted from behind the director's back. "But the Venusian would not do anything so obvious, Director Barrow." Mart whirled around. Barrow turned slowly and with dignity. It was the tall man dressed in the uniform of a smelting plant worker who had spoken, but he wasn't dark-haired any more. Still seated, he was smiling at them sardonically as he fanned himself with a black wig he had just removed. The top of his head was as smooth as a billiard ball and dead white. There was a line of demarcation where the dye he had applied to his face came to an end. He had removed the tinted glasses too, and the blank, surfaced grey eyeballs showed why they had been worn. Now that the simple disguise of wig and glasses was removed, Mart noted some of the other distinguishing features that marked the Venusian. The general flatness of the face and flat, unconvoluted ears, the 6-fingered hands that had probably been thrust into the pockets of the stolen uniform. The Venusian glanced down at the wig and glasses. "Standard equipment," he explained. "I always carry them in my ship, and they've come in handy before." He rose and bowed mockingly. "My name is Norn, and your supposition that I am a pirate is correct. But I assure you that my visit here is accidental, and I have no designs on Compra Town." Norn, the most vicious and notorious of the pirates, and the most ruthless killer of them all. Mart hastily jerked open the drawer of his desk and pulled out a hand blaster. He started the formula. "Under authority of the Interplanetary Council, I arrest you to be held for trial." The sardonic smile did not fade from the pirate's thin lips. He rose and extended his arms upward. "I am unarmed," he cut in. "It will help our discussion if you will verify that." "Before the Supreme Council on Earth," Mart finished. Then, glancing sidewise at Director Barrow and seeing him nod, he stepped forward warily. Venusians, he knew, were both fast and tricky. Watching every move, he completed the search. Norn carried no weapons. Why? Mart wondered. Had the pirate walked openly into headquarters and given himself up? Obviously, Norn had something up his sleeve, but... Director Barrow spoke coldly as Mart stepped back, still covering the Venusian with a blaster. "Norn, you speak of our discussion. There is nothing to discuss. You will be sent to Earth." The pirate's face became vicious. "I do not think so," he snapped. "I have taken a hostage. It was quite dark, your tiny Callisto in eclipse of its huge primary, when I was forced down. But darkness means nothing to a Venusian. You Earthmen play a strange game with cardboard rectangles. To use its language, Director Barrow, I have an ace in the hole." Norn sat down again and folded his 6-fingered hands quite calmly. Light from the ceiling overhead seemed to cast a malignant glow on his dead-white scalp. "Your daughter, Director," he continued. "If you wish to see her again, you will give me a ship, your fastest ship." There was a moment of dead, utter silence. Then Director Barrow leaned over the desk and flicked the key of the communicator. "Control, get Leah Barrow at once. Ring her room. If no answer there, get my housekeeper. This is Director Barrow." "Your fastest ship," repeated the Venusian. "Well stocked with supplies. Enough to take me to a place in the asteroid belt. I shall be too late now to carry out my original plans on Ganymede." The office door opened, and Captain Wayne came in, followed by Roger Corey. Their eyes widened as they saw the Venusian. Wayne's hand darted toward his holster, then relaxed as he saw Mart's blaster trained on the pirate. He faced Director Barrow and saluted. "Captain," Barrow ordered, "you will form a search party at once. Every available man and means. We must search all of Callisto within," he made a rapid mental calculation, "about 50 miles. You will be searching for my daughter." The captain stiffened. Before he could reply, the carrier wave hummed, and a feminine voice, that of an elderly woman, came over the communicator. "Director Barrow, Leah isn't here. I looked in her room, and her bed is disarranged as though she left suddenly. She always makes it herself as soon as she gets up." "Anything to point to when she left, Mrs. Andrews?" "Not exactly, sir. The alarm was set for 6, and it was still buzzing. Her bed isn't very mussed. It looks like she got up again almost right after she retired. I don't understand." Director Barrow's face was bleak. His voice sounded like the drip of water from melting ice. "Clothing?" he asked. "Her lightweight spacesuit is gone. Apparently she put it on over her sleeping pajamas, for they aren't here. Is there anything I can do, sir? I'm worried. She hasn't ever—" "That will be all, Mrs. Andrews," Barrow replied. "I'll let you know if there is anything." He turned to Captain Wayne. "Use this set, Captain. Get communications to send out a general alarm and assembly. You can make all necessary arrangements right here." Wayne crossed to the communicator and began to issue rapid instructions. "Tell them to hurry," the Venusian cut in mockingly. "They have until 9:30 o'clock. Mart Wells glanced fearfully at the dial of the chronometer. It was 8:40 now. He turned and caught the director's glance. "The timer," he said grimly. "Captain Wayne said it was missing from the wrecked ship. He must have—" The Venusian was grinning. "Exactly. The timer. And a pound of uranite. That gives you 50 minutes to search Callisto. It would be wiser to spend the time getting a ship ready for me instead." The silence of the office was broken only by the low voice of Captain Wayne giving orders into the communicator. Abruptly he turned to his superior. His face was white. "Search is on, sir. But if he isn't lying, there's a chance in a million, less than an hour, and the area to be covered is—" Barrow was looking straight ahead, and not a muscle of his face moved until he spoke. "I'm afraid he isn't bluffing. No reason why he should be. Leah is gone, and the timer is gone, and a pirate ship would have uranite." "The ship?" asked Norn. "It will take some time to fuel it, and—" Director Barrow's voice was positive. "There will be no ship for you, Norn." Roger Corey's voice cut in jerkily. "Let me work on him, sir. Me and Wayne. Maybe we can make him talk." Barrow shook his head. "No use, Corey. Venusians don't mind pain as much as Earthmen. They almost like it. You could take him apart, and he wouldn't talk." The pirate's smile faded. "It will take half an hour to prepare the ship, Director Barrow. Better not stall too long." Mart said, his voice urgent. "But, sir, Leah, what's one pirate compared to?" Barrow's face was granite-like. "He's killed hundreds of people. If we release him, he'll kill hundreds more. One life cannot weigh against that. Corey, take him away. Lock him up until the next ship leaves for Earth." Mart's fists were clenched, his fingernails biting into the palms, but he knew Barrow was right, that he couldn't possibly take any other course and be worthy of his post. One life couldn't weigh against the many lives that meeting the pirate's terms would mean. That was where Norn had miscalculated. A Venusian didn't understand responsibility to society, nor any higher ideal than self-interest. Norn tossed the wig and glasses to the floor as Corey took his arm. His pupil-less eyes seemed to glow with anger. "You won't murder your own daughter, Director. This is a bluff. But mine isn't. She dies at 9:30 unless you find her. I swear that, by the eternal Varga." Mart cursed. Fists balled. He lunged toward the Venusian. Barrow put a hand on his arm. "Don't, Wells. That's up to the Interplanetary Council." "But he's not bluffing," Mart raved. "Leah will surely die at 9:30. That damned oath! Varga is the only thing a Venusian is afraid of. He isn't—" His voice broke. Corey started off with the Venusian. Barrow said, "Yes, he's telling the truth. But we have some time yet. Maybe the search—" Mart strode to the window and looked out so the others wouldn't see his face. Less than 3/4 of an hour to search all of Callisto within a radius of 50 miles. Through the pane he saw figures in groups of 3 searching the streets and buildings of Compratown. That part of the search wouldn't be difficult, but the hills and the caves, and with only 2 autogyros, if she was there, out of sight in one of the caves, where the cruising ships couldn't see her. Her father was right, but the picture of Leah Barrow, smiling as he had last seen her, seemed to blur out the view from the window. Her impertinent little tilted nose, the soft tempting contours of her lips, the deep blueness of her eyes. He whirled from the window and began pacing the floor, trying to think of something they could do that wasn't being done. Again at the communicator, Captain Wayne was barking questions. "All available men and women are combing the town, sir," he reported, "with orders to break down any doors that are locked, to stop at nothing." "And outside, Captain?" "The 2 gyros are our only real hope, but the men from the smelting plant are working afoot out of town. By 9:30 they'll have covered a radius of about 5 miles. Corey returned, slamming the door viciously behind him. "Maybe we could trick him, sir," he suggested. "Pretend we'll give him a ship if he'll—" "A Venusian wouldn't trust his own mother," Barrow snapped. He'd insist on taking off first and then radioing back where she is. And don't think he wouldn't check the fuel tanks. I wish you'd let me and Wayne work on him anyway. Director Barrow didn't answer. Mart growled, If Leah dies, I'm going to take that filthy pirate and... Wayne's voice was bitter. Venusians can't help what they are. Blame the Earth Council that sold them those ships. If they had used more sense, there wouldn't be a Venusian off Venus. Mart nodded. If the Council hadn't pulled that boner 20 years before, there would be no trouble with the Venusians. Venusians were, compared to Earth standards, a strange combination of genius and idiocy. Brilliant mathematicians, they had no mechanical ingenuity whatever. Linguists who could speak any language fluently after hearing it a few hours, not one of them could create a child's wind-up toy. Knowing the laws of leverage, they constructed their buildings by manual labor alone, able to operate any machine as long as it was in good working order. They couldn't as much as figure out how to repair a clogged fuel line. Even the pirates based on some of the bigger asteroids had to depend upon a few renegade Earthmen to keep their ships in running order. And if one went blah away from base, it was a gone ship as far as they were concerned. Probably the trouble that had forced Norn down on Callisto had been a minor matter that any Earthman could have taken in his stride. But to Norn it meant a new ship or nothing. The thought of ships reminded him of the freighters. Cap, he asked Wayne, the freighter's been searched thoroughly? Wayne nodded. Rocket tubes and all. Even broke open the ore drums. I presume you'll want them to clear on schedule. Director Barrow nodded. The crews? He asked. In the search or standing by? Standing by for departure as usual, Director. A few men one way or the other. Barrow nodded, glancing at the chronometer. Mart knew what he was thinking. Less than half an hour now, and unless the searchers by some miracle found Leah Barrow, it would all be over before the 10 o'clock clearance of the first freighter. And the freighters hadn't missed a clearance in 10 years. The carrier wave hummed again. Central Communications reporting. Most searchers in the town have reported in. No results. Those outside reaching points 3 miles out. The communicator faded. Mart clenched his fists against the futility of that search. 3 miles. The strong Venusian, in the light gravity of Callisto, probably had 8 or 10 hours of darkness to carry his burden. He could easily have covered 20 to 40 miles in any direction, possibly even more. And the chance of an autogyro. Obviously, Wayne had been thinking the same thing. He timed his arrival, he said bitterly. He gave us less than an hour. He'd certainly have put her outside walking range within that length of time. And with all the caves around, thousands of them, would he have put her where a gyro could spot anything? Mart glanced at Barrow. The director was sitting as immobile as a statue. His eyes were closed, and every muscle of his thin face was tense. Probably he was trying not to look at the chronometer on the wall. It was 9:15. The office door opened, and 3 uniformed mechanics from the field stood in the doorway. The foremost of them saluted. This entire building has been searched twice, except this office, I presume? Director Barrow opened his eyes and stood up. Don't presume anything. Search here, too. The men came in and began a detailed but fruitless search. Nobody spoke until they left. The chronometer said 20 minutes after 9 now. 10 minutes to go, if the timer had been accurately set. But could it have been set wrong? Venusians were lousy mechanics. Maybe... Mart became aware that he was holding his breath for the sound of a distant explosion. Yes, from whatever point Norn could have hidden his hostage, the sound of a pound of uranite exploding would carry back to Compratown. He sat down at his desk again. In front of him were the signed clearance papers for the freighters. In half an hour he'd take out the papers for the first freighter, but before that half hour was up... He twisted a pencil between his fingers, held himself rigid to keep from turning and looking at the chronometer again. It hadn't been over a minute since he sat down. Why torture himself by looking again? But each minute now seemed both a flash and an eternity. He turned over the sheaf of papers and drew a little square on the blank reverse side of the bottom one. That was Compratown. He made a dot an inch or two away. That was the point where Norn's ship had wrecked itself in landing. He drew a line from the point to the square. That was Norn coming into the town. That would have been about 10 hours ago. Then, from the information about Callisto and Compratown that had been in the papers in Norn's ship, the pirate had found the home of the director. He would have no trouble finding Leah's room. Venusians could see in the dark and walk as silently as cats. He would undoubtedly have drugged Leah into unconsciousness, probably without awakening her, since there had been no sign of a struggle. He'd put her into the lightweight spacesuit. Why? Undoubtedly it indicated that she would be outdoors. During the Callisto day it would have been unnecessary, but an unconscious Earthwoman would freeze to death in the cold dark period of Callisto's eclipse behind Big Jupe. What then? The Venusian left, carrying her. He threw down the pencil and began to pace the room again. His muscles were tense from listening. How many minutes? He didn't want to know, dared not look. But Norn must have planned it all before he left the wrecked ship. Otherwise he wouldn't have taken the timer and... Would he have rigged the time bomb first, or after he had kidnapped Leah? And how? The timer itself would not have provided the concussion to set off the uranite. He'd have needed a battery, a spark coil, and... But Venusians weren't mechanics. They didn't understand machines, or electricity, or even simple clockworks, brilliant as their strange minds were in other ways. Norn could have set the timer all right. For that matter, he could calculate an orbit and make settings for spaceflight. But he couldn't have made a time bomb, even with the timer. He couldn't have rigged a circuit that would set off a cap. And, Mott realized suddenly, the timer itself would be an electrical, not a clockwork gadget. Once disconnected from the now broken dynamo of the ship, Norn couldn't have made it run at all. A momentary surge of elation swept Mott. Norn must have been bluffing. Then he remembered. A Venusian might murder his own family, but he would never swear to an untruth by the eternal Varga. That one superstition, or religion, as they looked upon it, was binding beyond all else. And Norn had sworn by that oath that Leah Barrow would die at 9:30 unless... Mott looked at the chronometer. It was 26 minutes past 9. He caught a glimpse of Director Barrow's face. It looked like the face of a dead man. Barrow had obviously given up all hope and waited only for the 4 minutes to pass. The carrier wave hummed. All of them started, but the voice from the communicator merely reported, "All Compratown reports in. All negative. Gyros report nothing. Foot parties 5 miles out. Reports negative. 3 minutes to go. Mott could see by the attitude of the others that they were bracing themselves for the sound of an explosion. All of them had liked or loved Leah Barrow. Mott had a momentary vision of her again, and remembered the electric thrill that had run through him when she had placed her hand on his arm just a few days ago, and told him that she did care for him. Well, a little anyway. But if Norn couldn't have rigged a time bomb, how could he have arranged for Leah to die at 9:30? He saw again the corpse-like face of the director. Yes, they had all been wrong in thinking that nothing mattered to Barrow more than the schedules. Schedules! There had been departure schedules among the papers in Norn's ship. Could he have— With a sudden intake of breath that was almost a gasp, Mott whirled and ran to the communicator. The others looked at him, startled. Mott was yelling at the mic even before he got near enough to it to talk in a normal voice. "Control! Emergency! Get Jupe Freighter 1. Tell him not to test his tubes, not to touch a lever." Then he was racing out of the door and across the field to where the big, ugly freighter was up on the racks over the blasting pits. He wasn't counting on that message through the communicator. Out of breath, he hammered on the steel door and yanked at the handle until the pilot opened it from within. "Hold everything!" Mott yelled at him. "Don't try the test blasts!" Whether Mott was right or wrong, there needn't be any hurry now, but he was already lowering himself into the ash-filled blasting pit under the rocket tubes of the freighter. Carefully, he groped among the ashes from previous blast-offs, ignored the light, soft ash that flew up into his face. A hand touched heavy cloth, and the other found smooth transparent the helmet of a spacesuit. Gently, he lifted the unconscious body of Leah Barrow and handed her up to the men looking down from the rim of the pit. 10 minutes later, back in the office, Leah was reacting to the antidote Doc Rogers had just administered. A glance at her face had told the medico that the drug had been Venusian tragweed. Mott was still answering questions. Sure, Norn knew that. Every ship in the system makes its trial blasts just half an hour before takeoff. It's a fixed convention. Rocket captains do everything according to a rigid schedule, and we were looking for a time bomb, so we'd never think of the blasting pits. But Norn couldn't have rigged a time bomb. We didn't think of that when we found the timer was gone. He'd just thrown it away. Someone was wringing his hand, and he saw it was Director Barrow. "Mott!" Barrow's voice wasn't cold and distant now. All the ice had melted. "I can't begin to tell you how much, if there is any reward I can possibly offer you." Mott Wells grinned. "Unto your daughter and half of your kingdom, as they used to say in stories? Well, sir, I don't know what I'd do with half of Callisto, but as for the other part of it—" He turned back to the awakening girl. Director Barrow's answer was cinched. Of course. But Leah? Well, he'd have to ask her again. But probably she wasn't up to that just yet, even though her eyes were open now and she was smiling at him. He'd have to give her time, of course, before he asked her. Lots of time. Say, 5 minutes, or maybe 3. The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. This is what the future looked like many, many years ago.